Hey you, mop lady, can you even understand English? Get that filth out of the corner. Some of us are trying to eat. The voice, belonging to a fresh-faced lieutenant named Miller, cut through the low hum of the mess hall on FOB Trident with the grating confidence of unearned authority. A few of the younger soldiers at his table snickered into their trays, the sound brittle and nervous. The woman he addressed didn't flinch. She was a slight figure, dressed in the drab, functional clothing of a local contractor, her dark hair tucked neatly beneath a simple headscarf. She paused her methodical work, her hands still on the worn wooden handle of the mop, and looked toward the corner he indicated. A small splash of mud, tracked in by a dozen boots, marred the otherwise immaculate floor. She gave a single, small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement so devoid of emotion it seemed to absorb the insult entirely. Then she turned and moved toward the corner, her steps economical, her posture balanced, a study in quiet efficiency. Across the crowded room, Master Chief Petty Officer Thorne watched the exchange over the rim of his coffee mug. His eyes, which had seen 3 decades of conflict in every dust-choked corner of the globe, narrowed slightly. He didn't see a cleaner. He saw the way she moved. He saw the subtle, constant scan of her eyes, never resting on one spot for more than a second, cataloging exits, occupants, and potential threats. He saw the calluses on her hands when she'd wiped down his table earlier, calluses that spoke not of mopping floors, but of a lifetime gripping the checkered steel of something far heavier. He saw a discipline in her silence that was louder than the lieutenant's jeers. But when the Master Chief saw her stance, the way her weight was perfectly centered, ready to shift and react in an instant, a cold flicker of recognition sparked in his memory, a ghost from a past he rarely spoke of. He dismissed it as an old man's fancy, but the image lingered, a question mark hanging in the tense air of the forward operating base. If you believe respect is earned through action, not rank, type earned below. The daily humiliation became a small, ugly ritual on the FOB. Lieutenant Miller, emboldened by the lack of reaction, seemed to make it his personal mission to use the silent cleaner as a prop for his authority. He would drop things intentionally, make sarcastic comments about her speed, or loudly question the security protocols that allowed unvetted locals such free access. He was performing for his men, building a persona of a tough, vigilant officer who noticed the little things, yet he was blind to the most significant detail in the entire compound. The woman, whose contractor file listed her name as Anya, never offered a word in her own defense. Her silence was a fortress, impenetrable and absolute. She simply did her job, but her job was done with a precision that was, if one cared to look, unnerving. The floors weren't just clean, they were sterile. The tables weren't just wiped, they were aligned with geometric perfection. Her cart was not just a collection of supplies. It was organized like a surgeon's tray, every bottle and rag in its designated place, ready for immediate deployment. It was a form of meditation, a physical manifestation of a mind honed by years of relentless discipline. Outside the mess hall's walls, the tension on the base was a palpable thing. The wind had picked up, carrying the fine, red dust that heralded a coming sandstorm, a perfect cover for enemy movement. Intel chatter was high, whispering of a complex attack, a coordinated effort to strike a high-value target. And that target, the pride of FOB Trident, had just walked into the mess hall. Bravo 6, a team of SEALs, moved with the easy swagger of men who knew they were at the top of the food chain. They were loud, confident, and radiated a lethal energy. They grabbed their food, laughing and joking, and sat at their reserved table, treating Anya with the same polite indifference one might afford a chair or a salt shaker. She was simply part of the background, invisible. Miller saw his chance, sauntering over to the SEAL's table. "Can you believe this, Master Guns?" he said, gesturing with his fork toward Anya. "The brass is so worried about hearts and minds, they let the whole damn village wander around the wire. It's a security nightmare." The irony was a physical weight in the air, a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. The world ended not with a bang, but with the sudden, jarring silence of a power cut, immediately followed by the scream of the base alarms. The humming lights of the mess hall flickered and died, plunging the room into a disorienting darkness broken only by the hellish red glow of the emergency strobes. Before anyone could fully process the blackout, the chaos began. It wasn't the familiar whump of incoming mortars. It was the sharp, intimate crack of small arms fire from inside the room. Figures who had been serving food or sitting quietly at contractor tables rose as one, revealing concealed weapons. It was a sophisticated, coordinated ambush, a Trojan horse sprung in the heart of the fortress. Soldiers scrambled for cover, their shouts and cries of pain drowned out by the staccato rhythm of gunfire. In the center of the storm, Anya did not scream. She did not panic or freeze. The instant the lights went out, her body reacted before her mind had time to think. She dropped, not in a heap of fear, but into a low, coiled crouch behind a thick steel serving counter, the mop handle clattering to the floor. Her eyes, no longer passive and neutral, were now wide and sharp, pupils dilated to drink in the strobing red light. She wasn't seeing chaos. She was seeing data, threat vectors, muzzle flashes, the number of hostiles, the types of their weapons, the tactical layout of their assault. The SEALs of Bravo 6, though caught by surprise mid-meal, reacted with the ferocious instinct of their training. They kicked over tables for cover, drew their sidearms, and began returning fire. But they were in a kill box, exposed and outnumbered. The attackers were disciplined, moving with purpose, their fire concentrated and accurate. They weren't spraying and praying. They were systematically dismantling the most lethal fighting force on the base. The SEAL team leader went down, a cry of pain cut short. Two others were pinned behind a flimsy barrier, their ammunition running low. Lieutenant Miller, the man of loud words and regulations, was a statue of pure terror. He fumbled with the clasp on his holster, his hands shaking uncontrollably, his face a pale mask in the flashing red light. All his practiced arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only the raw, useless core of his fear. The situation was deteriorating with terrifying speed. The enemy fighters were not simple insurgents. They were professionals. They moved in pairs, covering each other, communicating with terse hand signals in the strobing darkness. Their primary objective was clear: capture, not kill, the SEALs. They overwhelmed the remaining operators, disarming them with brutal efficiency and using their bodies as human shields to consolidate their position near the kitchen entrance. A command element, two men directing the assault with cold precision, stood protected by the captured Americans. From her concealed position behind the serving line, Anya processed the unfolding disaster with the cold detachment of a battle computer. She saw the enemy's strength, their coordination, and identified its critical weakness: the two commanders. Take them out, and the body would be left without a head. But she had no weapon. Her hands, calloused from a lifetime of holding rifles, were empty. Her preparation was a blur of silent, purposeful movement. She was a ghost in the chaos, her small form slipping through the shadows between the strobing lights. She didn't run. She flowed, using the panic of others as her cover. In the kitchen, she found her arsenal. Not guns, but tools. A heavy, solid steel meat tenderizer. A large, industrial coffee pot still full of scalding black liquid. On the wall, a CO2 fire extinguisher. Her plan formed in a fraction of a second. The execution was a masterpiece of violence and misdirection. She pulled the pin on the extinguisher and blanketed the area around the command element in a dense, blinding cloud of frigid white fog. The sudden sensory deprivation caused a moment of critical hesitation among the enemy. In that moment, she moved. She exploded from the fog, a wraith of pure lethality. The first hostile caught the full force of the steel tenderizer just below the kneecap, the sickening crunch of bone lost in the din. As he went down, she pivoted, slinging the entire pot of boiling coffee into the face of another, whose screams were instantly silenced by a precise, disabling strike to the throat. She moved past the writhing men, grabbing a compact submachine gun dropped by one of them. The weapon felt like an extension of her own body. No hesitation, no wasted motion. She brought it to her shoulder, acquired a sight picture through the swirling fog, and fired a controlled, two-round burst. Both rounds struck the primary enemy commander in the chest. She shifted her aim, firing another two-round burst into the second-in-command. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The aftermath was a sudden, profound silence. The enemy assault, so disciplined moments before, collapsed into confusion. Their leadership was gone, neutralized by an unseen force. The remaining fighters faltered, their momentum broken. The surviving SEALs, bruised and bleeding, stared into the dissipating white fog. Out of it walked the mop lady, the SMG held perfectly in a low-ready position, her eyes scanning methodically for any remaining threats. Miller, still frozen behind a table, could only stammer, his voice a choked whisper. That's not possible." The heavy thud of combat boots announced the arrival of the base's quick reaction force. They stormed the mess hall, weapons raised, expecting to find a massacre. Instead, they found a bizarre tableau: wounded SEALs, neutralized hostiles, and a small woman in a cleaner's uniform holding a submachine gun with the practiced ease of a seasoned operator. Master Chief Thorne was the first one through the door, and his eyes bypassed everything else. They locked onto Anya. He saw the way she held the weapon, finger indexed safely along the receiver. He saw the way her gaze swept the room, checking corners and doorways, the so-called fatal funnels. He saw not a person in shock, but a professional finishing a job. The final, unbelievable piece of the puzzle slotted into place. The memory of a briefing years ago, about a clandestine unit of deep cover operatives, ghosts who moved through the world unseen, came rushing back. It wasn't a fancy. It was a fact. He lowered his rifle and approached her, his voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the stunned silence. "Stand down, operator." For the first time, a flicker of something registered on Anya's face. Not relief, but simple acknowledgement. The tension in her shoulders eased by a mere fraction. She methodically cleared the weapon, ejecting the magazine and pulling back the bolt to show a clear chamber, before placing it carefully on the floor. Her movements were clean, precise, an ingrained ritual. Thorne keyed his radio, his voice low but firm, directed to the base commander in the Tactical Operations Center. "Watchdog, this is Trident Actual. I need a priority file check. Name, Sharma, Anya. SHARMA, cross-reference with project." Wraithfall. There was a pause filled with static. Then the commander's voice came back, strained with disbelief. "Trident Actual. Say again your last." Thorne repeated the name and the project code. Another, longer pause. The entire QRF, the SEALs, and Lieutenant Miller watched, their world tilting on its axis. Then the commander's voice returned, stripped of all authority, replaced by pure awe. "File confirmed. Unit, Task Force 77, Special Operations Directorate. Designation, Wraith. Combat deployments, 17, all classified. Awards, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with 3 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star with Valor. All records sealed at the highest level. Status, active, deep cover, asset protection protocol." "My God, Thorne, do you know who you have there?" The disembodied voice from the radio echoed in the sudden, tomb-like silence of the mess hall. Every word landed like a physical blow, dismantling the reality of every person present. The young soldiers who had snickered at Lieutenant Miller's joke stared, their faces pale with a mixture of shame and terror. The battle-hardened SEALs, men who defined themselves by their elite status, looked at the small, unassuming woman with a dawning, humbling comprehension. They had been protected by a guardian they hadn't even deemed worthy of a second glance. The cleaner's drab uniform seemed to shimmer and fade, replaced by the invisible, untouchable aura of a legend. Master Chief Thorne turned from the radio, his gaze sweeping over the assembled soldiers, his expression carved from granite. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of 30 years of command, and it flayed them all. "You are looking at the reason Bravo 6 is breathing right now," he began, his tone cold and deliberate. "You are looking at a Tier 1 operator who has spent more time in active war zones than every single one of you combined. You saw a mop. You saw a headscarf. You saw what you wanted to see. I saw a professional maintaining her cover." He took a step closer, his eyes boring into Lieutenant Miller, who visibly shrank. "Assumptions get you killed in this line of work, Lieutenant. Today, your assumptions, your arrogance, almost got these men killed." He gestured with a thumb toward the humbled SEALs. Then, in a gesture that stunned the room more than the gunfire had, Master Chief Thorne, a living institution within the Navy, a man whose senior officers addressed with deference, turned to face Anya. He snapped to the most rigid, formal position of attention he could muster, his back ramrod straight. He raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute, a gesture of profound and absolute respect. It was not the salute of a superior to a subordinate. It was the salute of one warrior acknowledging another, a recognition of a duty and a sacrifice that transcended rank and uniform. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My apologies for the security breach on your watch." For a moment, there was only the sound of breathing. Then, the leader of Bravo 6, his arm in a makeshift sling, struggled to his feet. He, too, snapped to attention and saluted. One by one, the other SEALs followed suit. They stood, bloodied and beaten, rendering honors to the quiet cleaner who had just saved their lives. Anya offered only a small, almost imperceptible nod in return. It was all that was needed. The story of what happened in the mess hall spread through FOB Trident with the speed of a desert fire. It was whispered in Chow lines, relayed in hushed, awe-filled tones over encrypted comms, and debated on secure forums by personnel thousands of miles away. It became an instant legend, the fable of the ghost of Trident. The details were fluid, morphing with each retelling. The number of hostiles she neutralized grew, the weapons she used became more outlandish, but the core truth remained immutable. The quietest, most overlooked person on the entire base had been, by far, the most dangerous. The incident had consequences. Lieutenant Miller was quietly relieved of his duties, pending a formal inquiry. But the punishment was secondary to his transformation. Weeks later, he was seen on his hands and knees in the mess hall, long after he had been reassigned to a dreary logistics desk, scrubbing a stubborn stain from the floor. He didn't speak to anyone, but when a new group of contractors entered, he stood up, walked over, and offered them a bottle of water from his own pack. He had learned the lesson, seared into his soul by terror and shame. The measure of a warrior is not in the rank on their collar or the flag on their shoulder, but in the content of their character and the quality of their actions. Anya, the catalyst for it all, was gone within the hour. A black, unmarked helicopter landed, and she boarded it without a word, vanishing back into the clandestine world from which she had emerged. She left nothing behind but the legend and a single, tangible artifact. The submachine gun she had used was tagged as evidence, but someone in the armory, in a moment of reverence, had carefully scratched the name ANY into the polymer stock. It was never issued again. Instead, it was mounted in a display case in the base's main briefing room, a silent, powerful reminder against the sin of arrogance. The mess hall itself was subtly changed. It was no longer just a place to eat. It became a kind of classroom. New arrivals were brought there, and a grizzled NCO would point to the spot where she had stood. "Right there," he would say. "That's where we learned that you never, ever judge a book by its cover." The ripples of that violent afternoon spread far beyond the wire of FOB Trident. The incident triggered a top-down review of operational security, specifically concerning the vetting and oversight of locally hired contractors. The vulnerability exposed by the attack, and the corresponding asset hidden in plain sight, forced a paradigm shift in how the military viewed its soft infrastructure. Arrogance and assumption were officially identified as critical security threats. Master Chief Thorne, now a sought-after speaker at leadership academies, made the story the centerpiece of his lectures on modern warfare. He never used Anya's real name or designation, referring to her only as the janitor. He would stand before a room of bright-eyed, ambitious young officers and pose a simple question. Who is the most important person on your command? Is it your top sniper? Your best pilot? Your intel chief? He would let the question hang in the air before continuing. The most valuable asset you have might not be the one with the most ribbons on their chest or the highest security clearance. It might be the person you walk past every day without a second thought. Competence is quiet. Arrogance is loud. Your job, as leaders, is to learn how to listen to the silence. The survivors of Bravo 6 were irrevocably changed. The swagger that had defined them was gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful humility. Their team leader, upon returning to full duty, instituted a new, mandatory training evolution for his men, which he unofficially dubbed the Sharma Protocol. Once a month, his entire team would be assigned to work alongside the base's civilian support staff, cooking in the kitchens, changing tires in the motor pool, cleaning the barracks. It was a lesson in humility, a forced perspective shift designed to remind his elite warriors that the world was filled with quiet professionals of every kind, and that true strength lay in recognizing the humanity and potential in everyone, not just those who wore the same uniform. The legend became a tool, a modern military parable that actively made the fighting force better by attacking the institutional pride that could so easily curdle into dangerous complacency. 2 years passed. At a formal ceremony under the crisp blue sky of Virginia, the leader of Bravo 6 stood on a stage, a newly pinned Navy cross gleaming on his chest. He spoke of his team, of the fallen, of his family. Then he went off script. His voice, steady and clear, carried across the assembled crowd of dignitaries and brass. "I'm grateful for this honor," he said. "But the real reason I am standing here today, the only reason, is a woman whose name I can't say and whose face I'll never forget. She taught me and my entire team a lesson we needed to learn, that the most dangerous weapon on any battlefield is a purpose that no one else can see. She was cleaning floors in a mess hall, and she was more of a warrior, more of a professional than any of us that day." A quiet murmur went through the senior officers in the front rows. They knew the story. The legend had permeated the highest levels of command. Miles away, in a rain-slicked Viennese cafe, Anya Sharma looked just as unassuming as she had in the mess hall. Dressed in simple civilian clothes, she could have been a student, a tourist, anyone. She read a short, coded message on a discreet burner phone, coordinates, a timeline, a target package, a new assignment. She took a slow sip of her espresso, her gaze lifting to scan the street outside. For a fleeting moment, her eyes held the same calm, lethal focus, the same profound stillness she possessed while standing amidst the carnage she had wrought. The legend lived its own life back in the world she had left behind, but the professional, the ghost, had already moved on. Legacy is not a statue in a courtyard or a name etched in stone. It is not found in the noise of celebration, but in the silence of imitation. True legacy is a lesson learned so deeply that it changes the behavior of those who come after. It is a young lieutenant who now offers a bottle of water instead of a callous insult. It is an elite team of commandos who learn humility is a survival trait. It is a story told to remind the proud and the powerful that greatness often wears the camouflage of the mundane. Anya Sharma left behind no monument, only a standard of quiet competence that now echoes in the respectful silence of every soldier who remembers to look deeper, to judge slower, and to honor the quiet professionals who walk, unseen, among them. This story is more than an account of a single, extraordinary event. It is an exploration of an ethos that forms the very bedrock of the world's most elite units. The creed of the quiet professional is a sacred trust, a deeply held belief that substance will always, eventually, triumph over style. It is a promise that actions, not words, are the final arbiter of worth, and that the mission's success must always supersede the ego's demands. Anya was not an anomaly. She was the purest distillation of that creed, a living embodiment of the principle that the most effective force is often the one that is never perceived until the moment of impact. Her story serves as a powerful indictment of our most common human failing, the lazy, reflexive habit of judgment. We build cognitive boxes for the people we meet, labeling them based on their uniform, their job title, their accent, or the dirt under their fingernails. Lieutenant Miller's failure was not one of tactics or training. It was a catastrophic failure of imagination. He was incapable of conceiving of a reality where the mop lady could possess a skill set vastly superior to the decorated SEALs he idolized. He lived in a world defined by superficial hierarchies, and his world was shattered by the undeniable truth of her competence. The narrative of the Ghost of Trident is a weapon against that kind of mental lethargy. It challenges us to dismantle the boxes we build, to question our own ingrained assumptions. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that we are surrounded by greatness we are too blind to see. The potential for heroism, for extraordinary skill and profound courage, is not confined to those who wear the trappings of power. It resides in the quiet, the overlooked, and the underestimated. This is a universal truth, extending far beyond the confines of a military base. In every office, on every street, in every community, there are quiet professionals performing their duties with a diligence and skill that goes unnoticed and uncelebrated. They are the foundation upon which our society is built, the silent engines of progress and stability. Anya's fight in the mess hall is a dramatic metaphor for their daily struggle, a battle against the loud, arrogant, and superficial forces that seek to dismiss their worth. It is a story of vindication, not just for one operator, but for every individual who has ever let their work speak for itself in a world that too often only listens to the loudest voice. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where silent precision defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.